Assalamu alaikum and welcome to Perspective. After Pakistan has given India a resounding defeat in, of course, in the war, we've also seen recently a new kind of diplomatic offensive being launched from the Indian side. We've also seen them diplomatically channelizing, sending teams, parliamentary teams to all over the world. We'll be talking about the ramifications of this development and also the recent cozying up to Afghanistan that we've seen as far as India's foreign policy is concerned. What are the ramifications of these developments in the region? And particularly, of course, we've also seen the statements come from Trump, Donald Trump, and of course, the US and the way that it's taken up the issue of Kashmir. It's also taken up the issue of Pakistan, India, the way that, that recent shift and its own ramifications as far as Pakistan, India is concerned, as far as the region, particularly peace in the region is concerned, and in terms of what can be expected from a rogue state like India in the wake of these developments. All of that today on Perspective. I have with me Javed Jadoon, who's a senior journalist. We'll be joined by Brigadier Retired Haris Nawaz, who is a defense analyst, and a little later on we'll also have Aizaz Ahmad Chaudhry, who's a former foreign secretary. Javed Saab, can you hear me?
Yes, I can, Mark.
Javed Saab, we know that, as far as the situation stands with the way that Pakistan, showed India what our, where our strengths lie, the way that, of course, India was, taken aback by the strength that Pakistan showed. But the situation at this time, as we see it, with the diplomatic offensive coming from India, with their parliamentary teams being sent all over, which is, news that is coming in. We're also looking at cozying up, like I said, to Afghanistan. A lot of changes and quick changes happening from the Indian side. First of all, do you think these are thought through policy initiatives, or these are quick reactions to what was perhaps unprecedented success by the Pakistani side? The escalation to de-escalate that we saw happen from our side. Is it, in your opinion, a thought out policy initiative by the Indian side? How do you see it?
Thank you very much, Mahrukh. Mahrukh, what really happened was that it was a huge diplomatic setback for India, because India always believed that in the aftermath of Pahalgam incident, the world will come to their support. Particularly, they wanted the USA, the European Union, and the UK as well to come out with very categoric statements supporting Indian stance vis-a-vis Pakistan. That didn't happen. Then they attacked Pakistan on the premise of a false flag operation, and they believed that the world community in general and the USA and the important European capitals will support India's offensive against Pakistan, because India was trying to sell this theory that Pakistani terror targets were hit, while on the contrary, the civilians were hit. I think that was a huge diplomatic setback, and you can hear certain voices inside India as well. For example, the Indian Congress is talking about the diplomatic setback that Modi received, and they believe that India has been isolated. A very recent statement coming from the Congress leaders, and you can watch the YouTube channels and Indian media as well, where some very important analysts like Chalani and even to the extent I have seen Karan Thapar as well talking about the setback which India received in the aftermath, because the ceasefire, even it was contested while the BJP tried to sell the story that it was Pakistan which reached out to the American president or the American decision makers to intervene and stop the war, the conflict going on. While on the contrary, the news sources from Washington and even the important news channels like CNN reported that it was India. Nick Robertson, I even mentioned last time, that was his exclusive report. He is a correspondent working in South Asia, and he reported that Indians basically and primarily reached out to the Americans to intervene. So now your question, I don't believe it is a diplomatic offensive. They are trying to do the damage assessment, and now they are trying to find out what the global capitals perceive whatever happened between Pakistan and India. They believe that President Trump will support them because Prime Minister Modi always touted himself as a person to be very close to President Trump, and he always told the Indian public and Indian Parliament and the Indian political elite as well that he has very close ties with President Trump. President Trump's praise for Pakistan, even I was just watching his very recent statement that he would like to do trade with Pakistan because Pakistanis are a brilliant people, quote unquote, and they make a lot of very good things, and we would like to do trade with them. He said that once again he re-emphasized that the two countries were getting closer to a nuclear conflict. Therefore, he intervened and helped stop that conflict. Now, keeping in view this whole situation, realistically speaking, India is on the back foot now. Now they are trying to reach out to the important global capitals, and they have even included some of the Congress leaders as well in their delegation. So I think it's a kind of a damage control move, or rather, they are trying to salvage Indian prestige, which received a very.
On this, I think that we'll talk more on this. Let me come back to you. I'm going to go to Brigadier Haris Nawaz. Ji, Brigadier Sahab, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Ji, Brigadier Sahab, as far as, we've seen Rajnath Singh also, the Indian Defence Minister, and the statements that are coming from there. Do you think that, these statements, again, is it a lot of hyperbole? Is it a lot of, a lot of comments that are just thrown into the air? Or do you think that it's also, as far as the threat perception overall is concerned with regard to India and, how they view Pakistan, you think that that has changed considerably and this is a reaction from of that's coming through? Or do you think it's typically the arrogance that we've seen from the Indian side for a while now?
It is basically typical arrogance because the reasons are Indian went to USA president, they begged for the ceasefire escalation and Pakistan agreed. But you see the point is Indians have created a war hysteria. You must have seen their media, social media, public opinion, and then they lost miserably. Now what the losers can do, they only can give up hopes to their people that the Operation Sandoor is still on. We will do this, we will do that. That's what they can tell the public. But the public, they can't sell this to now the public. The public has come to know that Indian government and military are mainly lost. And they are internationally isolated also. That is more important. Now the problem is Pakistan government has to go for diplomatic offensive and catch this opportunity. We must select best communication skills are MNAs and senators. They must be, along with some good teams of, I would say, the ambassadors all over the world is there. They must become the part of the team and tell the world what India is doing, how India has escalated, how this terrorist group of 4 people is warmongers, and they believe in terrorism, and they brought the 2 nations, 2 nuclear countries, to the brink of nuclear war. That is very dangerous. And then how India is doing terrorism in Pakistan. Pakistan is a victim of terrorism. We lost 80,000 to 1 lakh people and we suffered economic loss of $150 billion. We have never been able to project this. Nobody buys these things. Now that we are really
there, as far as Afghanistan, for example, is concerned, the recent cozying up to Afghanistan that we've seen, as far as India is concerned, there is, of course, there was a lot of criticism on Afghanistan, on Pakistan, and, of course, traditionally the way that we were clubbed in with Afghanistan by the Indian side also. Do you think that, that shift, do you think this is also, again, a knee-jerk reaction, or you think that there is, a long-term shift there as far as Afghanistan and India is concerned?
You see, the Indians have already have an interest in Afghanistan. Recently, I believe Afghanistan's foreign minister, Mr. Taki, had visited and met Indian foreign minister. It was a very secret visit, but it was exposed by some paper. So that's how we want to tell them. We want to tell the world what India is doing. India is saying is fine. problem is we are a victim of terrorism. We must tell them what they have done in Jafar Express train. The terrorists were attacking that train. They were killing innocent people. They were finding live videos to the Indian media and to the social media, and those were projected by Indians like they were feeling so happy. They were making holes around it. You see, the point is, did we do like this? When we have security committee meeting, we did send a lot of condolence. We said we showed solidarity with the victim families.
Ji,
The
Brigadier
point
Sahab,
is
I
not.
will come back to you. Let me come back to you. I think there's a problem with audio. Ji, Javed Sahab, again, as far as Afghanistan and India is concerned, this recent, do you think that there's a shift in policy overall, or do you think that this is, and again, is it a knee-jerk reaction, the way that we see India, cozying up to Afghanistan? We know how critical they were. We know traditionally, as far as Afghanistan and India are concerned, it's a strange kind of reaction. How do you perceive its effects in the sense that, is it going to, is it a quick reaction, or you think it's going to stick, in terms of their long-term policy?
Mahrukh, I don't read much into the getting closer between New Delhi and Kabul, because Taliban are very pragmatic people. They understand that Pakistan has been their benefactor. Pakistan hosted more than 4 million Afghan refugees for over 4 decades, and Pakistan provided them shelter, medical facilities. Their families were living in Pakistan. Still, some of the families are in Pakistan because, and second most important thing, there are divided tribes living on both sides of the international border. So getting closer doesn't mean that Afghans are going to extend any kind of a support to India. They will not do that because they know the ramifications and repercussions, because even the Afghan people wouldn't support Taliban. It is just the kind of a gimmick on part of New Delhi that they are trying to convey this perception that they're getting closer to the Afghan government. We may not have very good relations, diplomatically speaking, with Kabul, but that doesn't mean that, our relations have been very complex and paradoxical with Taliban, given the safe havens and sanctuaries of terrorists inside Afghanistan. But I don't believe Taliban regime, de facto government, will go to the extent of supporting New Delhi, because they understand, they know very much, as being a very pragmatic people, that it would have very long-lasting ramifications and repercussions, diplomatically speaking, because Taliban, they know that.
Even if we look at the US and the way that, constantly we were, for India, of course, it was Pakistan and Afghanistan. But we know now that as far as the US is concerned, we've seen the recent statements that President Donald Trump is also making, and we've also, seen him put Pakistan and India, on the same sort of mantle, and he's talking about a policy, he's talking about a resolution to Kashmir, he's talking about a sort of de-hyphenation of Pakistan and Afghanistan. Do you agree with this, first of all, and do you think that
Yes, you're right, Mahrukh. One is the de-hyphenation of Afghanistan and Pakistan. Second is, despite the fact India never wanted any third-party mediation as far as resolution of Kashmir dispute was concerned, and now once again many intellectual people and the strong voices as far as the civil society, media is concerned, the serious debaters I'm talking about, they believe that India by default has once again internationalized the Kashmir dispute, when President Trump said that he is ready to mediate between Pakistan and India. Though they haven't responded yet, but I think they have been put in a very tight corner. I'm talking about New Delhi, because they always said that it's a bilateral issue and they would never like to have any third party mediating between Islamabad and New Delhi. Now, the problem with the Indians, rather the paradox of the Indians, is they really can't annoy President Trump due to several reasons: the ongoing tariff war, and Prime Minister Modi projecting himself as a friend of President Trump. And President Trump, interestingly, has equally staged the two countries, India and Pakistan. He hasn't favored any country. Rather, Indians always expected that President Trump would come out openly in support of Indian stance or Indian position. That hasn't
Except
happened.
that India wouldn't want to, of course, annoy the US, but they're certainly irked by what, the way, like you said also, that we've been put on, the same sort of, mantle as far as Pakistan and India in the eyes of the US, and the statements are very balanced. Do you think that that itself is something that is going to necessitate a different kind of a policy initiative from Delhi?
Yes, I think that is the very reason you're right. When they are trying to send some delegations to the important world capitals, because Mahrukh, let us not forget that there were two serious setbacks. One was militarily, and second was diplomatically. India always believed that they are a superior power in terms of military capability, and after acquiring state-of-the-art fighter planes from France, they started believing that they can punish and they can punish Pakistan and take revenge of 2019's downing of MiG-21. And the facts are right in front of us. They put into action more than 80 fighter planes against Pakistan between the night of 6th and 7th of May.
Thank you, Javed Saab. Thank you so much for joining us today. We're going to go to Aizaz Ahmad Chaudhry, who is a former Foreign Secretary. Aizaz Saab, can you hear me?
I can, thank you.
Aizaz Saab, thank you for joining us. First of all, in terms of the region now at this time, as far as Pakistan and India are concerned, these policy initiatives that we are looking at from the Indian side, do they signal a policy shift as far as Afghanistan is concerned, in your opinion?
Well, for India, this is a signal towards shifting its approach towards the Taliban. The Indians have always been highly critical, not critical, highly critical of the Taliban regime. And here it is that out of their own volition, they have given up their principled position and are trying to join hands with them. It is not the first time that India has done that. You remember, India has always used Afghanistan for a double squeeze against Pakistan. But I agree with the previous speaker who was indicating his assessment that the Taliban would not go to that extent because they know that their future lies with, Afghanistan's future lies with Pakistan. These are two direct neighbors with, centuries of cultural and other exchanges. So therefore, even if India tries to woo Taliban, I don't think Taliban would be able to play India's game. And if they do, the relationship with Pakistan will deteriorate sharply. And I hope they don't go in that direction. My own sense from the recent contacts that Pakistan has made with Afghanistan, especially at the special representative level with Ambassador Mohammed Sadiq was there in a trilateral along with China. I think there is great degree of progress being made in normalizing relations between Pakistan and Afghanistan. So we should not really expect that India will get any breakthrough there. We should continue to work on the Taliban regime along with China.
Do you think, in terms of China also, we know that China is also, the biggest trade partner with India. As far as, our relationship with China is concerned, with, of course, the kind of, help that we've had from the Chinese side, do you see that relationship also changing significantly, or you think that it will again, India realizes that they cannot, mess with, of course, a neighbor like China?
Yes, it is true that China and India have an strong economic and commercial relationship, but they are strategic rivals. That's the nature of the relationship. Because India wants to act as a kind of main power in South Asia, and it thinks that China is exercising its influence in all countries of South Asia, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, elsewhere. So in that sense, India treats China as a rival power in South Asia. So I think this rivalry will continue, and China Pakistan strategic partnership is a natural alliance between the two, because Pakistan also does not want to see a hegemon India, a policeman India, trying to condescend the smaller, relatively smaller countries. No, these are not small countries, Pakistan, Bangladesh. These are only relatively smaller countries. Otherwise, in their own right, they are pretty big countries. And Pakistan has had always had cordial relations with China, and that I think equation is not going to change. And therefore, I think India will have to contend with China, Pakistan partnership, a kind of two-front situation for them. But this is of their own making, because if they were not as hostile to Pakistan as they are, probably Pakistan would have liked a peaceful coexistence with India. We've been giving constantly these signals. And this particular conflict also has made it abundantly clear that Pakistan exercised maximum restraint till the end. They sent missiles on the early morning of 7th May, and then Pakistan still showed restraint, except that we targeted we in the aerial combat, we made sure that their aeroplanes will not be able to function properly, and we downed at least 5 of them. But then Pakistan still waited. We didn't make any offensive until 8th May. They started sending drones, and even then Pakistan was ready to give diplomacy a chance, because the United States and Saudi Arabia were making these approaches. But on the morning of 10th, when they invaded, our 3 bases with their own missiles, I think that's where Pakistan thought that it has to respond. And once we responded in a very, very coordinated manner, I must say everybody has now seen how capable and effective was Pakistan's coordinated response, that India itself sought a ceasefire from.
There's no doubt, like you said, the way that, very calculated, our response was calculated, of course, and, it was designed to, de-escalate essentially, like you also said. But, interestingly, as far as India is concerned, it's certainly true that, like you said, they see themselves as, how they see themselves, of course, is different from how it seems, and we've seen how the world and the region itself perceives them. But their usefulness as an alternative, for the sake of, a better word to, for example, a country like China, has sort of been exposed for the world, don't you think? I mean, and how whether they're actually as useful as an ally for any country, pitching them against China. Do you think that's a significant blow?
I get your point. United States has been watching all along, and I think in the initial days after the Pahalgam terrorist attack, the United States actually gave a free hand to India, because India had been boasting that it was so powerful, and there is such a big conventional imbalance with Pakistan that Pakistan is a walkover. So Americans must have said to them, all right, try your luck and let's see. And once they were not able to really live up to their claims, I think Americans must have also started thinking that it's better to save their, sort of friend, because they were preparing that friend for pushing back China, for countering China, and here they are. They can't even, manage Pakistan's retaliation. So you are right. I think Indians, as an ally, as a friend, have lost a lot of credibility to the West, particularly United States, because they were really banking on them, and they had invested so much on them.
Do you think that they're also using diplomacy at this time? the way that we're looking at them sending missions and, you know, trying to sort of up their position that they feel, you know, the face, they've lost face. I mean, there's no denying that if you look at, you know, the region overall and in front of the international community.
Yeah, I think, America's diplomacy and initiatives have rattled them, particularly when United States, through its President Donald Trump, proposed that there should be talks at a neutral venue. And then they said that President Trump can attempt, resolution of the Kashmir, mediation on the Kashmir dispute. Indians weren't really expecting that. So they, in their own views, calculated that perhaps if they send envoys, this all will change. I don't think this all will change. I don't think so. I think what they had to do is something that they have not done, which is to provide evidence that Pakistan was involved. And you just heard the British Foreign Secretary also saying that we don't have the evidence as yet. And you saw the New York Times also reporting that Indian media was relying mainly on lies all along. So they have been badly exposed to their own partners and friends.
So David Lenny's statement, in a sense, exonerates Pakistan from the kind of allegations that India has been making. But do you think that their reaction, at least, at the very least, they're reticent and openly reluctant to engage in, talks and whatever engagement we've seen also has been very, very reluctant. Do you think that, the US is also, this is also something that, of course, is the way that the US is putting us on an equal platform. The US and India relationship, do you think it's going to, it's going through perhaps a phase where there are a lot of realizations on both sides?
I don't think so, because India has publicly rejected President Trump's call, or Secretary Rubio had made that tweet for talks on a neutral venue. So this has pushed India against the United States because they have taken public positions, and President Trump has repeated that throughout his trip to the Gulf countries. And Indians honestly are not able to. So they think that perhaps they were not able to sell their narrative, and therefore they need to send these envoys. And my contention is that they were not able to convince their own partners because there was no Pakistani hand, and they were consistently saying that there was a Pakistani hand. And there, I'm doing some research for my book, and I have seen that, many of these terrorist incidents that had happened in India and for which Pakistan was blamed were actually turned out to be some inner elements which had staged those attacks. So India's credibility is fast losing. Sending these envoys actually will not make much difference. Although I believe that Pakistan must also put together its own perspective, not only on Pahalgam, because we have nothing to do with that, but also on Indian involvement in the incidents inside Pakistan. This recent train.
I wanted to come to that, Aizaz, that, of course, like you said, it might make no difference, and that seems to be the popular opinion. And they are making mistakes, with their hastily, hastily cooked up foreign policy we've seen with regard to Afghanistan, with regard to sending envoys, all of this. Do you think we should let them make these mistakes, or Pakistan needs to, like you said, launch its own diplomatic offensive at this time?
I think Pakistan should launch its own diplomatic offensive, and I tell you why. There is a greater deal of sympathy in the Western ears now to hear Pakistan's perspective. And they can see that India has been exposed for all the lies that were spoken out on the media. And therefore, they would be ready to listen to Pakistan's perspective. And that's where I say that if you are able to prepare those years on Pakistan's involvement in Balochistan, on India's involvement in Balochistan in various terrorist incidents, and then we should also file cases against the people like Yogesh Kumar and others who were involved in target killings in Pakistan. We should file cases. We should get letters rogatory from the courts against these accused, send them to Interpol, and also send to our own ambassadors as well as the envoys, which should go and explain our perspective. It is very, very important. You see, India has an advantage that it has many English-speaking channels, whereas Pakistan has only PTV World. and therefore they are better connected to them. Plus, many of their think tanks are connected to the think tanks in the US and elsewhere. We have think tanks who are, some of them are also connected, but we need to put out our narrative even more effectively, because this is the time that the world is ready to listen to you. They know that Pakistan was victimized this time. They know that a false allegation is being imposed on Pakistan. So therefore, our view, our perspective must be, made known to them, that the root cause of the problem in India at this time is their occupation of the Kashmir state. And from that, there is, given that India has done so much there in terms of suppression of Kashmiri sentiments, particularly since 2019, that you cannot guarantee that.
Right, but I'm going to interject. As far as like you said, of course they do have a lot of English speaking channels, but they also have exposed themselves as far as their media is concerned. Do you think in journalists like Barkha Dutt, no less, who are of course seasoned, and we've seen them expose themselves, we've also seen them expose the inaccuracy overall for the world, generally speaking. That itself is a blow, because the inaccuracy, the false allegations, just factually they've been completely fake news that has been circulated all over India. That itself is a blow to the kind of journalism that India is putting forward.
I agree with you 100%, but my contention is slightly different. My point is that we should not sit on this and become complacent that things are all okay. No, I think we have a lot of work to do. We need to tell the world what India has been up to in Pakistan. We also need to tell them what we have been doing to make sure that Pakistan's soil is not used against anyone. The actions that we have taken, and then Financial Action Task Force and 1373 monitoring teams, they all came and they gave us a clean, health bill. So they were all very, very impressed with the steps we had. Now the world needs to see all that. Now all that, for example, the place they targeted Murid ke. There's nothing for the last several, maybe more than 2 decades. But we need to hold conferences there, seminars there. There is no terrorist infrastructure that India is alleging. But the world needs to know. How do we know that? How do they know? By us, launching a diplomatic offensive.
Agreed.
What? Yeah. Okay.
But Aizaz, of course, I think that you very aptly put that, and we need to tell our story, and like you said, it's very important because the world is listening right now. But also in terms of, for example, Jay Shankar's arrogance, we've seen, the way that he's lectured the West very recently. You think that's also the reason that they seem to have ruffled some feathers and miffed, the West seems to be slightly miffed overall with the kind of arrogance that we've seen, that's indicative from the statements that he's made?
Yeah, it can also be a contributory factor, because of late these were very arrogant statements and arrogant remarks here and there, and they were so condescending to other powers within South Asia that it was, to be honest, very frustrating. That what kind of neighbor do we have which is constantly belittling other countries in South Asia? If it wants to be the regional power that should be respected, if it wants to be the net security provider, then it has to act that way. You can't be at the same time an arrogant power and a condescending power too. You can't be, because then the world will not accept, at least these countries will not accept. And Pakistan's effective conventional response has taken wind out of the, their balloon, air out of their balloon, which they had, sent up as saying that India is now a power to reckon with, and it's such a big economy and everything. Fine, but it does not give you a license to denigrate other countries, to pass satirical remarks on others, as it was being done by the External Affairs Minister of India vis-a-vis the Western countries. And I hope that they would learn some lessons, they would imbibe some humility in them, that if it is a bigger country, 1.4 billion people, if it is a bigger economy, it does not mean that it should start behaving so arrogantly. I think that's the lesson that India must learn from this. And that's the lesson that the rest of the world is also trying to inculcate in India.
But do you think, they're also in a quandary because there's, they instead of doing their job, they're trying to, uphold the kind of Hindutva ideology that is, preached under the Modi regime. And we know that, they've had to beef up their security also. So it seems to be an internal, internally India seems to be going through this also, because, the fabric of the society overall, that seems to be enveloped in this Hindutva that's damaging, and we know what's happened to their foreign secretary also.
Yeah, exactly. I think the kind of ideological shift that India has seen from what used to be under Prime Minister Nehru, a pluralistic and secular state, to a far right state. And the kind of statements these people make against some of their own citizens who just happen to be Muslims is so embarrassing. And that, look, this is such a big country which calls itself as a civilizational state. It is now stooping that low. And likewise, their attitude towards Pakistan and even now Bangladesh is also not acceptable, because for the last 9 years, they have refused to talk to Pakistan. I mean, which two neighbors would ever not talk to each other at least? And whatever signals Pakistan gave, they fell on flat ears. And therefore, we really we sincerely hope that for its own, for the future of 1.4 billion people, India would come back from that far right hysteria called Hindutva, because that's Hindutva philosophy we know from the teachings of Sarwarkar and Golwalkar, that they want only Hindus. India is for only Hindus and nobody else, neither Muslim nor Christians, nobody else is entitled to it.
Talking about Hinduism and the way that Hindutva doctrine has come out, they're talking about banning countries like Turkey, Azerbaijan. Do you think that, it just seems to have escalated on another level? And that also is indicative of, again, like I asked before, is this like, adventurism as far as the foreign policy is concerned, or how do you perceive it in your experience for India to, start talking? Yeah.
Yeah, it is overconfidence, because they think that they could isolate Pakistan. They failed. How can they isolate then Turkey and Azerbaijan? I mean, this is absolutely a novice for them to think that India can isolate any country. They have tried their level best to do that, but Pakistan has remained connected, and now this crisis has shown that the friends of Pakistan continue to stand with Pakistan, solidly with Pakistan, whereas the friends of India are not, because India seems to be sliding down on the scale of credibility. And these countries actually want India to come out clean on the Pahalgam incident first and foremost. Where is the evidence? Why are we? Because, I can narrate to you, because we don't have time, otherwise I will narrate to you what happened in Chhattis Singhpura, what happened later on in Patribal, what happened on Samjhauta Express, what happened even on Pathankot. In every case, after investigations, they found that there was a local element involved, and Indian Army was involved actually. So they should not really sit on the cradle of bigness without actually being big. They should not really belittle other countries and pass these kind of derogatory remarks, as sometimes their external affairs minister does to Western countries. India should live like a civilized country, as a good neighbor with the rest, within South Asia and within the world itself. But unfortunately,
But how do we expect that kind of rational behavior from India when, they're talking about, water terrorism, they're talking about trying to stop our water, they're talking, the latest that we've seen from there. For a neighbor, like you said, that coexistence seems to be a challenge at the very least at this time.
That's right. That's right. And stopping waters or even manipulating the flow of waters towards Pakistan will be an act of terrorism, an act of war. Pakistan has made that clear, and I think the rest of the world is also very perturbed on India's move, because this is not how you play with the water basins. And the world over, countries share waters, and therefore they don't want this to become a bad precedent which India is setting. And India should also know that to stop waters is an almost impossibility. They will require the kind of infrastructure they would require to divert it to Indian Punjab or elsewhere is enormous. And do they think that if they do this, Pakistan will sit back and just take it and swallow it? No, Pakistan will not. Pakistan has established its credibility as a potent force that would defend itself and resist India's hegemony. So Pakistan would then, react in a way that India may not like. How can India keep on building dams and steal Pakistan's waters? Will those bad dams stay then? So you see, India is crossing all limits, and this is simply not acceptable to the people of Pakistan. They are putting into jeopardy the livelihood of 240 million Pakistanis by trying to stop their waters. Is this really acceptable?
I know that you have little time and we're also running out of time, but one quick question. We know what Donald Trump said, when he said that these are not small nations and these are two nuclear nations. And he mentions us, he mentions the fact that he would like to trade with both Pakistan and India. And of course, not saying that, with trade with India more and Pakistan less. And so in that sense, of course, this seems to have been a big blow. At this time, do you think that we are, of course, on high alert, our forces are on high alert, and of course, we've also shown India that we can't be messed with. But at this time, we also can't rule out, and the world, of course, is watching adventurism or more adventurism from the Indian side. Would you agree?
I would agree, and therefore we should not lower our preparedness. But Mahrukh, I want to spend a minute, if you allow me, on Kashmir, because I believe that the kind of environment that now India has created in the Indian occupied Kashmir for the last 6 years with so much of force, and they having taken away their identity and imposing non-Kashmiri subjects there, so that their Muslim majority status is changed. Even the pro-India Kashmiris are really now very, very angry, very, very upset. And so therefore, because of the resistance to the Indian armed forces there, anything can happen there because of the local dynamics. So what would then will India again wage a war on Pakistan? They should really look at their own track record of what they are doing in the Indian occupied Kashmir. They must come down to resolving that issue, and it is not out of place for a third party to raise this issue, because that's the issue that India is not addressing. It tells in the rest of the world that we will resolve it with Pakistan, but with Pakistan it doesn't engage. Now I think everybody has seen that India's game plan, and therefore I think third party is required to resolve this issue. Unless this issue is resolved, there will be no peace and tranquility in South Asia. And I think the sooner India realizes that, the better it is for us, for it, as well as for the rest of countries in South Asia.
Right. Thank you so much, Aizaz. Thank you for your very valuable time. Thank you for joining us today. Overall, of course, we've seen the statements as far as Donald Trump is concerned. One, that these are not small nations when he talks about Pakistan and India. Two, that US would like to trade with both Pakistan and India. In terms of the way that the US has looked at Pakistan and India, certainly there seems to be parity, there seems to be equality. There's also, of course, that offer as far as Kashmir is concerned. In addition to that, there has been no evidence at all that has been shared as far as Pahalgam is concerned, which is something the international community has again noted. As Aizaz also said, the world is watching, and of course, the way that the events have transpired from the Indian side has itself vindicated Pakistan and our stance as far as Pahalgam is concerned. The question now is whether India can stomach looking at Pakistan as an equal neighbor, and there can be coexistence and a working relationship between both Pakistan and India. And of course that India must look within when it talks about its own social fabric that seems to be disintegrating under the Hindutva doctrine. Let's hope that it can do that. Thank you so much for joining us today on Perspective.